Aloha, Aspabo. Thank you for taking your power back. I had a dear friend share that with me when I was doing ceremony with him. My name is Veronica, and I have been wanting to show up for the collective for a long time. My inner child is not ready yet, but this is my birthday. I turned 42 today, actually in a few hours, and I want to make a really strong effort, excuse me, to share to myself and you visually a linear storyline of a journey that I went on, which is the hero's journey, because I would like to write about it. And I think I'm doing this just so I can make sense of myself. The first video was, whew. Excuse me. The first time that I had a psychic premonition, I think about 6 years old. I was on a boat with my dad, and he was sitting on the side of the boat drinking a beer, and we were going down, around the water pretty fast. And I remember looking at him and saying, "Papa, you're going to fall off the boat. You need to be careful." And he looked at me and said, "Ho, ho, ho, no, I'm not." And then like 1 minute later, he was over the boat, and all I could see was the sky just spinning around in circles. That was the first time I was psychic, because I'm just piecing together. If you've seen the movie Practical Magic, which I tried to watch recently and I had to turn it off because it was just too annoying for me to watch it. But there's a girl in there that they keep saying, "Oh, you're a natural," because she never really practiced anything or did anything. And, she's a natural, naturally gifted, is what I've come to realize. Is that's why it's so hard for me to share about myself, because it's like I've been observing this phenomenon of being a witness of this little girl that has gone through life and had these extraordinary experiences. And I find myself at this place being 42, and I feel like it is, a great honor and a great duty to be brave enough to share more about myself and where I came from. I don't know. I'm not a writer. I did love writing poetry when I was young, but I'm not like a classical writer. I would love to share my story someday, but I'm attempting here in this video to briefly give a little cap on some of my spiritual awakenings that have occurred. And I'm hoping over the next few years I get more and more grounded, so I'm able to share in a way that can be more beneficial to the collective. But I think just being authentic and sharing, where you came from is kind of the idea. So that's what I'm trying to do. So it really started, I had a love. It was always one-on-one personal relationships that came into my life that really transformed and altered my life throughout my journey. It's just the nature of my own unique story. I have the moon in the 7th house. So my first love, his mother is a very profound healer, and she was a part of the Native American community. I was extremely fortunate. Actually, just before this download, I did go to a meditation class and learned how to ground my energy through meditating and bringing the roots through the earth. And that I went to one pagan ritual, and it was really scary, and I wanted to leave. But the next spiritual thing that happened for me was getting invited to spirit camp. And we were so blessed to learn a little bit of the native ways of Vision Quest, where you tie, I forget how many little cloths with tobacco in it, and you create a like a rope, like a string of prayers that gets circled around you. And I did my first Vision Quest. In fairness, the traditional one is for 4 days alone, but I did one for one night. And I happened to do it in an inipi, which is a traditional native sweat lodge. That night was very profound and interesting because they actually did a sweat while I was in the sweat lodge covered in blankets. After the sweat was over and they left, that was when I faced one of my first fears. There was a very strange green hand with pointy, like witch-like fingers trying to reach in under the sweat lodge and grab me. I guess being, 15, 16, I think I was 15 years old. That was my fear at the time, that something wanted to grab me and take me. And I had a lot of fears, actually, as a little girl. I was afraid of going into kindergarten, deathly afraid of my peers and my teachers. I used to have a reoccurring dream that wolves were chasing me, and I would get to my house, and right when I shut the door, I was safe. This is just my personal story. We all have this unique hero's journey story, and it's maybe in hearing mine that you will be able to piece together almost yours and honor your story. I don't really know why I'm doing this, because ultimately I do readings and I can get very specific about a person, but there's something in me that just needs to share my story. So I faced a fear, and I learned so much about the Native American ways of tending the fire. And there's a fire, and then there's a mound with all the sacred objects in the center, and there's the inipi. It's a very beautiful. It's their ceremonial rites and ways. I learned how to pray and fire keep, and I did my first vision quest when I was 15, and doesn't really matter, right around that time. The next thing that happened, I'm saying this just for my own records. The next thing that happened was when I was 18, I did a soul retrieval with, I went into community college and did a witchcraft and ritual course. And the teacher was so inspiring. He spoke about his wife and how she did Native American soul retrieval. So I ended up doing a soul retrieval with my mother, and I came to find that we had exchanged many, many soul pieces from a very, very early age. I just offered up parts of my soul to her, and she needed my support. That's another story. My mother was born in Wuhan, China. My grandfather worked for the CIA. He was a very, very good diplomatic man. And I believe there was some genuine innocence to him entering, because he was very intelligent and diplomatic and he wanted to be very successful. And there's nothing wrong with that. But along with my mother's upbringing, she escaped the Korean War. She was shot in the leg. She had to escape in the middle of the night. She had 3 sisters. They were born in China, Korea, and Japan. And she lived in the Orient until she came to the United States around 12, in which she finished off school and high school. So, in the Orient, you are to be seen and not heard. And she also witnessed beheadings. And so, the conditioning of my mother was passed on to me. So I had a lot of fear inside of my being. And it took me a long time to realize half of that was not even fully all mine. We really do take on the conditioning of our parents and where they came from and how their parents treated them. And they only do the best they can to give us what they know. And I guarantee you, if you look and examine where your parents came from, that they superseded what they had learned, because the will to love and to nurture and to evolve and to do better than what was done to you is the natural pulse of, I think, the human journey. So we exchanged this soul retrieval. It was very, very meaningful. And then right after, I was in another philosophy course. I've always had a very keen mind. I'm Scotch-Irish. I've always been very opinionated and idealistic and had a lot of things to say about what I believed or thought, 12 going on 40. But in this course, like, I raised my hand to say something because I felt passionate about speaking. And it was in this moment that I first had a direct witnessing of my negative inner critical voice. Because while I was waiting for the teacher to call on me, I could hear it. And it sounded a little bit like this. Shut up. You don't know anything. You don't know anything. What do you think you're going to say? Nobody cares what you have to say. You're so stupid. And by the time my teacher went, oh, Veronica, and asked me, what were you wanting to say? I was frozen, absolutely frozen, and in total despair. And I couldn't say anything. And during that time, around 18, I was just oscillating between moments of feeling so wonderful to be alive, so noble, so integritous, just so full of hopes and dreams that I didn't know what they were, just trying to figure out, like, what do I want to choose as a degree? Because that's what everyone's supposed to do, right? You just choose a degree and get it. And I just couldn't do it. I'm sorry. So I was very hopeful. And then I would go into like absolute depression and despair and sorrow and sadness and think I was just so terrible and stupid. And I was stuck in my mind, totally battling, feeling like it just going on, doing its thing, whatever it was doing. But that moment I realized what was happening and it wasn't good. So I decided to go into the medical office to find out if I was bipolar. And this was also simultaneously the first time that I heard my higher self speak for me. I have really always had my higher self speaking with me, and we all always do throughout our whole life. But this is the birth of becoming conscious of the higher self and of the mind. So the balance of the ego and the spirit. So when I was filling out the paperwork to find out if I was bipolar, because maybe that would help me to know whether I had a chemical imbalance, because I was very imbalanced. But here's the little secret. Unless you had a situation, which is almost nobody on the planet, you are going to be on the hero's journey seeking balance. And if you're fortunate enough, maybe you will achieve it by the time you are 30. But the truth is we all come from our conditioning, and our parents either under processed conditioning that they weren't able to handle because of a whole slew of events that might have happened for them. Like they did not have the legacy or the good fortune or the time to do the healing work. I believe that the 1982 babies and onward had the DNA coding to actually address and begin the beginning of this healing, like where you can process your wounding from your childhood so that you don't repeat trauma, right? But our parents before us, they were just paving the way for, transcendental thinking. I think that was the very beautiful route. And then there was the whole, drug movement of, getting out of the mind through substances. So it was a very blurred time in the 80s, like I feel like that kind of baby where I'm very experimentative, but also quite next level when it comes to the sustainable ways to heal and transform. So when I was filling out this paperwork to find out if I was bipolar, a voice spoke to me as clear as day, and it said, "What good is it going to do for you to label yourself?" And I stopped, and I had to think, because I could hear the voice, it was not coming from outside of me. It was directly inside my being. And then what I did next was quite interesting and took me for a surprise, because I was desperate to find answers. And it could have been really easy to just say, like, I'm bipolar, or this is my hang up. This is my issue. This is what is wrong with me. This is why I'm struggling. Let me just find this answer. Let me label it. I put down the clipboard and I walked out. And I never looked back for that way. And I'm not criticizing anyone or judging anyone or anyone that has had such severe challenges that they are bipolar and they got prescription medication that helped balance their nervous system. Whatever the case may be, please understand this is my own personal story. And I'm proud of it, of myself, but like, there are a multitude of different realities, you know, and how we deal with things. But I really do think that my story it could be helpful because it was a long, arduous journey, but I am actually quite an empowered, balanced person now. It took a long time, but the proof is in the pudding, you see. And I think my whole point before I continue is that a label will stop you. It's like a stop sign. You see a label, stop, then you stop. And you just imagine if you just stopped for eternity and this is your life and you just don't go any further. That's what labeling yourself can do. That's the point I'm making. I think this is the spiritual implication and why it's significant. And for some reason, I have felt a burning desire to talk about this for a very long time. This is quite a big story. So I walked out, and my life didn't get easier. I went on, you know, to continue going to school. I had so many ups and downs. I was what you would call intermittent. A part of me was very, very well, very good. I was able to do things, go and explore life and to socialize or go to a dance party or go to school for a little bit. I had a relationship with a man in Ireland, long distance. I was able to go live with him. I have a German passport, so it was easy for me. It was about flying over there. But the whole time I was challenged. I was emotional. I was confused. I did not understand. I was just crying a lot. I did try birth control, and that totally wipes a woman's emotional system out. I very quickly got off of that, and suddenly like the emotions went way down again. By the way, I blew up like a whale too. It like totally deformed my body. And once again, whatever works for you, please do that. For me, it was horrible. It just added to my confusion. I should add, okay, I'm just going to bounce way forward. When I was 26, I finally got a Vedic reading in which I found out that I was in a cycle called Rahu for 18 years. Rahu goes for 18 years, but I had it at the very beginning of my life. I had it from 12 to 30. And the nature of Rahu is that it is hungry, never satisfied. It can never fully digest anything because it doesn't have a bottom. It's only the head of the snake. Can't really digest anything. So it's like kind of relentlessly searching and hungry and wanting more. And I had Gemini in the 12th house, which is the house of spiritual enlightenment, liberation, moksha, but also the shadow side of the 12th house is insanity. So I was wrestling with not just my sanity, but the masculine and feminine, polar opposite, dualistic aspects of myself. And I've come to find so many valuable truths and jewels within that journey. And I am here to say that you 100% can rise through any challenges that you have within if you are able to have prowess and steady determination to heal. It's just the truth. Like, a lot of people, they just judge themselves for being sick or being bipolar or having ADD or OCD. Like, these are superpowers. Oh, you can't fucking sit there and just be a good sheep and get in alignment. Oh, you have a hard time focusing. Oh, because you're a brilliant, like, sewer, or you're a brilliant like artist and your brain just like doesn't know how to like slow down because it's so activated, like that is not something you want to label a negative inside of you. I really want an end to the labels. I know that they're helpful when things get too hard, but I'm just here to present that maybe you just need to love yourself through it all and care about yourself and your healing long enough, search far and wide enough to come to a place where you get all the jewels, the empowerments. Because of my confusion, my unending confusion that went from 12 to 30, that is such a long time frame, and at a very intense time when you are not only budding and like, you know, growing, but then having to get out into the world. And a lot of people project that you're like a young adult at 20. I am sorry, but they want us to just burn up our system and die off like as soon as possible. We are meant to live and be youthful and you know, be wise and crone till we're 120. We're not supposed to nod off at 82. We can if we want, you know, but I'm going to say, this is just what I feel. This is what I feel intuitively. This is what I believe. It is no mark of health or true intelligence to be well adapted to a sick society. Krishnamurti said that, and it's one of the most prolific statements I've ever heard. This is only scratching the surface. I just went on to have so many awakenings because I didn't label myself. I became a seeker. And in that seeking, it was not easy, but it got better. It got worse before it got better, okay? Like, I'm not even going to lie. I felt so empty and alone, and my self-worth was a void. I had no sense of self. I was so vulnerable, so exposed, but I just kept going. I tried everything. I went to a Scientology meeting. I learned a little bit about their healing technique. That's a story. I went to Yoga Institute. I was blessed enough to receive support from a very wise teacher that let me emote a lot of my story, a lot of my suffering, a lot of, you know, my wounding. So talking out things can really be helpful, but you don't want to stop there. I got this training, this Don Juan training of Tai Chi Yoga Flow, how to slow down. Like, you want to move so that if you were underwater, you wouldn't even create a ripple. Just, you know, just move without creating a ripple in the water. That was the goal. I faced so many fears working with my teacher. You know, I really dug deep down to what my issues were, you know, caring what other people thought, fearing that I would be abandoned or rejected, or I would lose my freedom. You know, there's some real universal fears that we all have, right? And the sooner that you explore and find them out. I did Ayurveda, balancing my diet. I'm light, fiery, hot, and dry. So I need heavy, cooling, moist foods. Ayurveda really helped me a lot. I saw countless astrologers. I forgot to mention, I started dabbling in astrology. I found a book when I was 12, and that was like the beginning of my self-repair, because my mom and dad they're amazing human beings. I love and respect them deeply. They weren't able to reflect to me on the level in which I needed to process who I was, and astrology was that mirror that did that for me. I can never stop speaking highly of astrology. It's also how I used to believe I would be worthy of interfacing people. When I met someone, I would say, "Oh, when's your birthday?" And I would have to write down their information and like tell them beautiful things about themselves so that I could feel, you know, worthy of speaking with them or interfacing them, or that the only way I could interface someone is if I had something to offer. There's so much beauty in who I was back then, but also there was so much wounding also, because we are innately worthy without any offering. Just you are the offering. Just your living, breathing, beating presence. Just your monkey arms that can reach out and hug somebody. Even not that, just your eyes looking at somebody. It's all an offering. I can say this now at 42, but when I was younger, that was not acceptable. I had to service 3 counties before I even had my massage license. So, of course, I had a mental breakdown. I was pushing myself over an edge. I was also battling some toxic traits of drinking and drowning out my inner child because she didn't know how to cope with anything. She had a very negative inner critical voice that was beating her up 1,000,000 miles a minute. And the only way out of this situation was fortunately to break down. I got to a point where I pushed myself so far to be accepted by my artist community. It was actually a day after I did a show called Intuitivo Vibraciones. I hosted some fabulous artists that I'll never forget. They all came and showed up for this show. It was a balance of electronic and acoustic. Our musicians, and we had like body painters there, and it was just amazing. And I literally went back up to the mountains of Santa Cruz and had a mental breakdown the very next day. And it wasn't until I packed up all my belongings and moved back to my home in the mountains, which I was fortunate to be able to go back to my mother's house. And I told my girlfriend on the phone, my brain is like a ball of yarn. I can't even explain what has happened to me. And that I could have been just labeled insane, okay? But like, life is about spiraling up. But if you go into denial about where you're at, it will make you insane. If you deny what is actually happening, and see, this is where our society is sick, because if you have an old soul, if you have any shamanistic gifts inside of you, you are going to have to face countless initiations and deaths and rebirths to be reborn again into who you were always meant to be. This is what happened to me. And what our society does is just throw you into a loony bin. We don't honor the spiritual side of life. This is what I want to write about. This is what I want to somehow share. And I will share this story in somehow better detail. But thank you, because I really need to say this, to share this, okay? So that was my first breakdown. And what was interesting about this is that I acknowledged, okay, my brain is like a ball of yarn, and I just have to very slowly untie this knot. That's how it felt. And I would walk up to the ballpark above my house, and it was such a lonely feeling to be in my hometown, my little small town. I felt like such a failure, like I had reverted, I had gone backwards. I had gone home when everybody was out going to college and getting out in the world and doing things. I mean, it was like a major ego death. It was major, but it had to happen. It had to happen because there was grace. Well, before the grace came, another interesting thing that had happened is I was up at the ballpark and I was feeling just completely overcome by negative energy. I was so lonely and sad and lost and confused, and my mind wasn't working. It was like I couldn't process what I was feeling. That's the thing, is I wasn't good at feeling my own feelings, and I was trying to run away from them. And it got so intense that I literally found myself going like this, and then I'd stop, and then I'd walk over here and I'd stop. And these like little zigzags became smaller and smaller and smaller until I just stopped and my hands fell into my head and I started crying. And I realized, you're trying to walk away from yourself. That was a huge realization, because this is the call. The only way out is through. You can't get away from yourself unless you commit suicide. And I can understand why some people have done that, because it can get so severe when you are having a shamanic death, when you are having an ego death, when you are dying to a former self that cannot cope with what is happening inside. But I'm here to represent the rainbow side of it. Like, you came here to transform. You came here to listen to your spirit. Now, I have another side, the sun and the moon. There's a whole another side of this story. My brother, he did not listen to his spirit. It got harder for him too, but he just kept pushing himself because he had to be important. He had to become something. He was not good enough. And he ended up jumping off a bridge. And this broke my heart because we were having a parallel journey. We were going through the same struggles, but at the end of the day, I surrendered and I said, I do not know what is going on. No matter how uncomfortable it was and how insane I felt, I let go. I mean, the grace was there. Shortly after I realized I was trying to walk away from myself, there was some clarity that came, and I decided through going back to another community college course in yoga, I decided I'm going to become a yoga teacher. I want to help people feel good. And I always knew I wanted to. That was the moment when I realized my bottom line. I want to at least contribute to the well-being of helping other people feel good. And this was the nitty-gritty beginning. I was only 20 when these things were happening. This is such a crazy, so many things happen. So many things happen in your early 20s. And people need to know that our society is not built to support the spiritual journey. It's just not. You're condemned, you're shunned. There's not a lot of space or place for people that are not getting in a linear way and just deciding, I'm a philosopher, I'm studying psychology. Believe me, I tried. I could not fit myself into one label of a career, of a degree. But I guess my label would have been healer. I was very reluctant. I wanted to be a DJ. I wanted to share in a fun way, and I still will and am now, many, many years later at 42. This is chapter 1. I'm going to pick it back up another time. I've been talking to you for 33 minutes. Thank you for hearing me this far. This is me trying to lasso my story and share it with you and get it out so that you too can rise up into your balanced, empowered self. Aloha.